Servus and hello, Matthias here, and this is Singletrack. It's virtual week for the Trail Running Film Festival. Super stoked for this. Yes, folks, if you have not had the chance to see our incredible 2023 selection of our incredible films, this is your chance. 9 films by 9 awesome filmmakers telling 9 wonderful stories of people from all over the world. This is trail running. This is what makes our sport so special. Tune in, be a part of it, get inspired, and challenge. Get your tickets at trailfilmfest.com and support independent filmmakers sharing these awesome stories. All right, trail racing season is upon us, and one of the biggest trail running events in North America just happened in Auburn, California. And I went down there and visited these hollowed trails for the first time. I ran several miles on a Western States trail, marveled at famous names like Roby Point, Forest Hill, and No Hand Bridge, and ran the 50K and actually finished the race. Hey, that hasn't happened in a while. Anywho, enough of me. I have an incredible guest for you, and we're talking Canyons endurance runs. Jeff Urbanski, brother of my coach Matt Urbanski, was signed up to run Desert Rats 2 weeks before Canyons, but the weather forced some race cancellations down there, and Jeff found himself without a spring race. Asked UTMB and was able to transfer to the Canyons 100-miler. To be able to sort of spontaneously jump into a 100-miler takes some guts and a good base, I suppose. I will let him tell his story and how he ended up in Auburn and how he crushed his race. Here's Jeff Urbanski. Welcome to Singletrack. Thank you so much for joining me. What's super exciting about this is that you and I both just ran Canyons. You a lot longer and you a lot faster, but nonetheless, congrats on Canyons and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me, and congrats on your finish as well.
It was a good race. Let's start off. Are you being coached by Matt, or do you have somebody you're like, I can't be coached by my older brother. That wouldn't work. I need to find somebody else. How does this work?
Yeah, Matt does coach me. He's officially coached me since I think the end of 2018, and he's always throughout my career. He's always had a hand in my training, but it wasn't until like December of 18 when I got on the real program and now being held accountable. So
So it wasn't just
we have the same coach. It's great.
I know, right? So it wasn't just brotherly advice anymore. Now you had to officially follow a plan and listen to him, right?
Exactly. Yep.
I like it.
It's been great. Honestly, it's been great.
I mean, it's been great for me too. I jumped on coaching for the very first time, and I was very hesitant about it for years, but I jumped on it last summer, and I only had 2 months before a 100-miler, and so it was a very tight timeline. I had a race to organize in between, and it was a super tough race that I ran, and so I missed cutoff, and so I was disappointed, but I kept going with the coaching, but I scaled way back because I had a couple 100-mile DNFs, and I was like, okay, I need to win. Not to win, I need a win. And so I ran just the 50K, which for this weekend, considering the heat, was a good decision for me, I think. It was really, really hot. Let's just completely skip the whole intro and stuff. We'll pick these pieces up halfway through the show. Let's talk about Canyons because I'm still kind of flying high. How was the race for you?
It's a roller coaster.
Okay.
Like always, with 100 milers or longer races, it's always a roller coaster. And, honestly, at the end of the day, I'm pretty proud of my race, and I'm happy, a little disappointed slightly, but overall, I'm pretty proud.
So you're disappointed because you didn't come into the top 10?
The A goal was to hit top 10. Yep.
Okay.
And I ended up 11th male. So.
And you were throughout the race. You were in a top 10 position. I watched your live tracker, right? You were on track. So since the last 15 miles or so are on the same route as my 50K, when did you collapse, or did everybody just rally?
Combination of the two.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was feeling it. I felt good through Forest Hill, and even that section coming out of Forest Hill. I was still, I mean, I was working, I was doing the best I could. But you know, I was alone out there, and it was, yeah, I was getting tired, right? And it wasn't until I got to Clementine and that's, you know, roughly what, 7 to 8 miles left.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when things really, I hit some trouble to where I knew my race was largely done, and I knew 10th mile was close and was coming.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't realize there were two of them coming that would put me in 11th. But they came together and they came fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, I knew I was pretty much, yeah, it was over.
Mm-hmm. And the
Yeah.
reason and the reason for people who haven't caught on to this, the reason why you wanted top 10 male is that would have given you direct qualification for this year's UTMB, correct?
Correct.
Was
And I don't know if this is 100% true, but I heard during the race that it's good for this year and next year. And so I knew I couldn't go to Chamonix this year,
okay.
but I would love to go next year. And so that's where I was just like, shoot, you know, it's so close.
There are a whole bunch of new rules that they sort of announced, but I haven't read a good article that laid them all out. And because they've been sort of for the pro athletes, I haven't really looked into it closely, but I need to look into that a little bit more about. But was that the motivation for you to get into canyons? Is to try to get top 10?
Honestly, no, I wasn't planning on running canyons until, you know, 2 weeks before the race. I was signed up for Desert Rats 100K,
Okay.
and then things took a turn when that was canceled.
So what happened there? I saw the announcement, but I mean, obviously you were signed up for it, so you kind of got more of an inside scoop. What happened there?
Yeah, you know, so the 100K was, I believe, was on a Friday, and it was a 5 a.m. start, and it happened to be raining the night before and then that morning. And I mean, it sounds silly because it was canceled due to rain, but given the terrain out there, you know, if you get enough rain, it's a mess. And my
Mm-hmm.
understanding is they weren't able to get, you know, personnel out to the aid stations and the supplies out there to do it safely. And so basically, you know, they delayed the start an hour. And then 10 minutes before the start, I was getting ready to go up to the start line and somebody told me, hey, it's canceled. And so I was like, well, shoot,
Mm-hmm.
it's 6 a.m. It's dark and raining. I just checked out of my hotel. I don't really know what to do. So I drove back home to Denver, and you know, and then ultimately they gave the 100K folks an option to do a 50K the next day. And I didn't really want to do a 50K anyway, and I was already back home, so I reached out and asked if I was able to potentially transfer my bid to the Canyons 100 miler, and they said yes. And so, you know, 2 weeks later, I went from you know, what was going to be a relatively flat and fast 100K to Canyons 100 miler. So it was interesting.
So what did your coach say about that?
You know, I've been at this a while, and so he knows me better than anybody, and so
Mm-hmm.
he knows I have a good base. You know, I've the since the course got rerouted from, you know, 23,000 feet of vert to 17, that was in my favor as well, since I hadn't really been doing vert training much throughout the winter, especially because it's been pretty snowy and icy out here in the hills. So he thought it was a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just it checked the boxes, right? It was you know, ultimately I got 8 UTMB stones. I got a Western qualifier. I had the shot at, you know, getting an auto into UTMB. And honestly, throughout the winter, I'd gone back and forth between Desert Rats and this race, but financially and logistically, it was just easier to do Desert Rats because I could
Mm-hmm.
just drive out there and it wasn't a big deal. So I'd had it on the radar anyway, but it just kind of all fell into place, and I had an extended taper. It was great.
Yeah, there we go. I mean, there's an interesting sidebar conversation. I went into, that was my first by UTMB race experience at Canyons, and I went into this very much with one eye open how sort of this UTMB Ironman organization that is positioning itself to be so professional is dealing with trail races of these long distances out in nature, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, the Auburn crowd is used to dealing with heat in the sense that they had so much ice there. Even for us slow people, there was still a lot of ice, which was great, right? I think here in Washington State, I've never seen that much ice at aid stations. So that was really great. But I mean, we did on top of this, Desert Rats had to be completely canceled, and it was already a new race part on the UTMB circuit. One of the distances got canceled, but then at Canyons we had a crazy heat bomb that descended on Auburn that nobody really foresaw. Right? I've been checking the temperatures in weeks prior, and I was like, Auburn's not going to be that hot. It's going to be fine early in April. And then and the race organizers had to deal with it, and then on top of that we had all the snow, so the 100K and the 100-mile course had to be completely rerouted, right? Which to you actually kind of was in your favor, but overall when you looked at the DNF rate on the 100-miler, it seemed like it was carnage out there, right?
Yeah, I looked at the numbers after, and I was just like, wow. Yeah, it was maybe a 45% finisher rating on a course that wasn't, generally speaking, wasn't a hard course relative to some others. But yeah, the heat, I think, just crushed a bunch. I mean, people knew it was going to be hot, but it's still, you have to change things, right? You can't just have the same race plan and go into it thinking it's going to be the same. I mean, you can, but
and what surprised me too, that the DNFs, because I mean, you were racing, so you didn't really kind of follow this during the race, but as I was seeing the DNFs rack up throughout the day, that I was surprised that it happened already in the evening, right? You had a very cushy 9 a.m. start. So you had to go through one day of heat, but then people DNF'd in like the evenings, when I thought, well, unless they got cut off because, cutoffs were too tight. I was surprised by that, because you'd think that if you're ready, if you're doing a 100-miler, you have to go through a night no matter what, unless you're Jim Walmsley, I guess. And in general, the nights are cooler then, right? That should bring you some relief if heat was the problem, right? What time did you finish?
I finished, I think, like a little before 5:30 a.m.
Okay.
So right after the 100K folks came out.
Okay.
So they all came by, and like a freight train. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, right. I imagine. Yeah, exactly. I went to the start line and I checked where you were, and I thought, well, perhaps I'll see you finish. And then I don't know if you finished 5:30. I don't know, boy. Perhaps I was grabbing a coffee or something like that, because my start was 6:00. So we sort of missed each other, right in between. Well, cool. Well, so that was good for you, right? Because you essentially finished before any kind of temperature rose again, right? I mean, I made it out of Mammoth Flats and we did the big climb at about 8:00 in the morning, and it was already getting really hot on that side of the hill. And I was like, it's 8:00. That's too early to be hot. I'm not having that.
I think that was one of the hotter parts of the race. I remember for almost the first half of the race, talking with guys, I was running with, being like, I feel so lucky out here because there was so much tree cover, so much shade. I mean, the temperature was hot, but there weren't a lot of exposed areas, at long periods of exposed areas early on. And I think that really helped. And I feel like there were a lot of stream crossings early on too, where, dip the hat in, put your face in, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until, I feel like right around like Mammoth, like there were spots out there I was like, woo, it's starting to get hot, or down by the river. And it was just like, okay, now I'm feeling it.
For us and the poor 100-milers, the finishers that I was overtaking on these last 7 miles from Clementine, once you crossed all the bridges, right underneath the big road bridge, and then no hands, right? These last couple miles at like 2, 3 in the afternoon, they were ugly
I
along the
believe that.
river, just because before you made your way up to Roby Point. Well, amazing. So let me ask you as a question that I've been throwing back and forth with Matt now for months. What do you eat during races? Because I get sweetened out. I have too much sweet stuff. And I mean, early season race, yeah, I wasn't prepared for the heat. I mean, I did some sauna training, which definitely helped, but my stomach wasn't really dialed in. And so I looked at the aid stations and nothing really looked good. What's your food strategy?
Yeah, this has evolved quite a bit over time, just for a variety of reasons. So I'm gluten-free and vegan.
Okay.
And so if I happen to eat something vegan by choice, gluten-free because of an allergy.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I eat the wrong thing, it can be game over for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, the days of when I used to be able to pick through and have quesadillas and pizza and whatever, that's long gone. So I generally eat all gels. So I probably had 50 or 60 gels, but
Oh.
throughout this race, I like everybody else, I started to have issues, and it's a game of troubleshooting, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, certain gels that typically work, they were not, they were not working. They were not going down well. So I found that, middle of the day, watermelon sounded great. So I started having
Yes.
watermelon,
Mm-hmm.
and later, after the halfway point, I started eating more bananas and things
Mm-hmm.
like that to just get something else in my body. And then it was just a matter of, having a gel and like having a chaser, tailwind chaser, just trying to just stomach it and get it down, just get any calories down. And I usually, I drink tailwind typically throughout the day, and that wasn't working. So I switched to water, but later in the day it was, switched back to tailwind to get calories. So it was just trial and error of, what I
Mm-hmm.
could do. But I'm typically a gel person, and I have a variety of them that, I kind of go through at various stages of races that go down better than others. But
Yeah.
that's my game. And so it can be tough.
It's tricky because all of them are so sweet. And when I'm at home, I don't really eat a lot of sweet stuff. And for me, it's not allergy or food choice. I'm not that much of a sweet person. And so, I mean, I do tailwind for most parts. And then I had some spring energy gels, which I like, but by like 1 o'clock or so, I was like, I mean, I do watermelon at the aid station, which is fine too, and orange slices and stuff, but I feel like I'm not getting enough calories in. Well, they're
Yeah.
refreshing and they're great, but they don't give you the calories, right? And so I'm trying for something that isn't sweet. And I had this spring energy drink, like this was like super liquidy
Mm-hmm.
drink thing, and it was so blisteringly sweet. It was like an apple ginger, but it was predominantly honey, I think, but very, very runny. And I drank it, and I like forced it down, but I was like, oh my gosh, like it was hard.
I generally have the same issue, and I usually start with honey stingers just because that's kind of my maintenance gel. They're the cheapest too, so I eat them regularly and I'm used to it. But eventually, yeah, you kind of start to get too much sweet, and so I switched to Morton and
Okay.
Spring Energy, awesome sauce, and I forget what like the 250 calorie one is, but those are the ones I usually switch to, and just to get more calories and less sweet, and yeah, that's why it's a combination of gels to try to make it through for that reason, because otherwise it's unbearable. And I like sweet things, and I can't handle it for that long.
Yeah. So like I don't know who needs to listen. I don't know what the science people are doing, but it would really be great if somebody could come up with a non-sweet gel, right? Give us
Yeah.
200 calories in gel format, easy digestible. I know that Cliff a few years ago was trying these. I think one of them was like a marinara, like it was like a tomato based, and it essentially it tasted like a thick tomato sauce that you would eat straight out of the jar. And I actually thought it was kind of good. And then they had a sweet potato one. And I think they were like, they were a little bigger and they were 300 calories. And I think they rolled them out once and nobody must have bought them or something because they immediately discontinued them. But
I like the idea.
I know.
I love
I
the
actually
idea.
thought they were kind of good, right? I mean, they were a little chunky, so they weren't as easy down, but I think they were going in the right direction. So give us something non-sweet, people here. All right. So, Desert Rats was your choice because it was close to home and easy. So for you, and I had announced that, told you beforehand that I want to talk to you about this. So you are sort of like skirting with, like, your bib said elite, right? You're like almost an elite, but clearly not sponsored by anyone. If anybody is listening, sponsor Jeff Urbanski. He's like super fast. I mean, he came in 11s at Canyons, please. Come on, sponsor contract now. I don't know what you would do. Has anybody approached you? I mean, do you get no? I mean, it's surprising because for us,
I don't feel like I'm at that level.
11th at Canyon? Come on. You'd think.
Honestly, I haven't performed very well in the last couple of years, so I'm not surprised.
You're not surprised. Well, to be quite honest, I am surprised because obviously I don't think about this at all, right? But it is surprising if you think of it from a larger industry or whatever, our sport, that the drop off is so fast, right? That they are like 2 or 3 people that everyone knows and they have the sponsor contract, and then you perform extremely well, but somehow you're not on the radar at all. I mean, which might be fine for you, right? I'm not like trying to like put you into a place, but since you don't have to worry about sponsor expectation, how do you plan your year out? How do you make a decision? Is UTMB the ultimate goal? How do you sort of lay out your year on how you pick races?
Yeah, so that's a great question because I mean, that's one of those that changes year to year. I've never gotten into Western. I'm 0 for, I think cumulatively 0 for 8 or 9. I think I have 7 years in a row, maybe.
Which means you should be like almost getting, if you put your head in the lottery every single year, by now you should have so many entries, you almost should get automatically in, right? By next
I think
year
that
or
every
so?
year. Yeah, but
yeah, I think that every year.
It's only getting harder and harder. But so Western's always on my mind. It's first you go through the lotteries, right? You go through Western and Hard Rock. And those, no, okay. I was fortunate to finally do UTMB last year, so
yes,
that now I've experienced Chamonix and all of that, and I certainly want to go back, but that's a bigger undertaking. With my wife says I can't go back unless I take her and the family, so I make it a family trip.
That
which I can understand.
I think that is very fair. I mean, my wife wouldn't let me go either, so I feel like that
we were supposed to go in 2020. We had a big family trip planned, and then obviously everything happened with COVID, so that got cut off. I went solo last year because we have a 1-year-old, so we weren't going to take everybody. But so yeah, I go through the lotteries first and kind of see how that shakes out, and then I kind of go to tier 2. And what I want to do there. And then generally that includes a Western qualifier, Hard Rock qualifier. In this case, finding UTMB stones. Since I came out of UTMB with 0 stones, I needed to get something to at least, at a minimum, get in the lottery. So those are the first things I do. And this year, I've had this goal over the last, I think, 3 or 4 years now. I also do 24-hour races. And so I like a variety of races. I'm not just, I'm not the guy who just loves intense mountain races. I love them, but I like, well, I don't know if I like, but I continue to do 24-hour track races. With the goal of, I haven't figured it out yet. It's like a different sport, and I've yet to put together a race I'm proud of, and I really want to figure that one out and get a good one and feel good about that. So ultimately, my brother and I are both trying to qualify for the US 24-hour team.
Oh, right.
This year, because Worlds is in December, and so yeah, I had to figure out that piece of it too. Where is that going to fit in? And so yeah, it's just kind of, they're always my bucket list races and places I'd love to go.
Mm-hmm.
And Desert Rats wasn't on that list, but it was a great training race for my 24-hour race that I have in June. And so just kind of stepping into the year of, making sure things make sense sequentially as far as, you know, effort, terrain, distance, all that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I have a kind of a weird year this year where I had canyons and I have a 24-hour race, 6 days in the dome in
Mm-hmm.
June, and then I have Run Rabbit later in the year. So just yeah, three totally different races.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, totally.
we'll see what we get.
Yeah.
But the A goal really was at the dome. I'm trying to put together a good 24-hour race and
Okay.
see if I can get that done and then race again in December.
For that 24-hour race, what does a good race for you look like? Because again, right, I think for me as a back of the packer, going into a timed sort of an endurance focus race, I think the goal would be just like, how far can I go? How do you approach this?
It kind of worked backwards. First, I don't know what it feels like to put together to have a good 100 or 24-hour race. I'm not sure yet. I'll let you know if that happens. But ultimately, it kind of worked backwards. So I mean, they take the top six. They take six people for the team, and it's effectively the people who've run the furthest. And so there's the qualifying standard is 145 miles, but I think realistically to make the team, you're probably looking closer to 150 to 155. So
Yeah.
kind of seeing what's been done and then, yeah, just kind of work into that. And
So do you break that
I don't
down then
know.
by?
I haven't got it yet.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, Matt always yells at me because I do too much math in my head during the race. But if you're on a 24-hour endlessly looped course, are you then very much focused on math in that situation? Or do you know your pace per loop, lap, mile?
You do, which is part of why it's so hard. I mean, it's one
Mm,
thing, we're out there at canyons and you're like, all right, well, I've got six miles of the next aid station. I've got, 1,700 feet of climbing and, 1,000 feet of descent. Like, that's what you're working with there. But with these races, like a desert solstice, I mean, there's a big screen where at every lap where you can see, what place you're in, what your lap time was, how far you've gone, all the information you could ever want. It's there every 400 meters, and it can be brutal. You
mm.
can get in your head real fast and have a quick downward spiral if you get a couple slower laps. And so yeah, I mean, it's really easy to start doing the math and then realizing what you need to do. And so yeah, I mean, I think it's just a game of being comfortable for as long as you can be, and then just realizing that, yeah, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna be really hard, and just keep grinding and keep moving.
Yeah. Fascinating.
It's a
I've
weird sport.
it that
It's like a different sport.
It is very different, right? I mean, I watch people do it, and yeah, I've not found it fascinating. What I like, a director for small little races here in the Olympia area, and what I like about the timed events is that I get to celebrate everyone who chooses to finish at whatever time they finish as a winner. Like, I don't feel like they're
Mm-hmm.
losers, right? If you show up at a 6 or 12-hour event, but your goal is only to go for 4 hours or to only go for a certain amount of mileage, right? And then you'll be done. I can celebrate you for having achieved that, right? I don't expect that every single person does the full hours. And that's a really fun way for me as a race director to look at it. But to actually run
I think
this,
you're absolutely right, though. It's really cool, though, because I mean, the first
right?
one I ever did was out at Palmer Lake here in Colorado, and it's a very much like, it was a lot. It was everybody, and there were little kids. There was an old couple I still remember who walked every lap hand in hand, for for shoot 20 hours.
Mm-hmm.
You get everybody, and it's just super cool to see. And I mean, for the 24-hour races I've been doing the last few years, it's basically been Desert Solstice the last 3 years, which is a higher, kind of higher level event. Everyone's going to set records or make the team, so it's a very different vibe.
Yeah,
but it's
it's an
still really cool because
invitational in some respect too, right? I mean,
yeah, you have to
yeah,
hit certain standards to
yeah,
go
yeah.
there to get in, but it's really cool because I mean, this past year I'm going running shuffling around the track with some people who I would, just talking and who I would never have the opportunity to do that with.
Hmm.
People I'd never get to talk with in a race. And I'm like, I remember talking with somebody who's just like watching Camille just lap us over and over. It's just like, when do you get to see,
Yeah.
somebody of Camille's caliber just all day, just execute
Hmm.
flawlessly? It's really a cool thing. And so, I mean, that's why I love the mountain races because, they're beautiful and it's great. But then you also get these other races where it's just a completely different experience and a different kind of cool.
Hmm.
And so I love them both.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's a good way of approaching it too, right? Because you're sort of in this really small, condensed location, and you get to talk to people and see people and stuff. It's very different, especially for the really long distances as trail races. Sometimes you're for hours by yourself, right? I mean, especially
Oh,
if you're
shoot, at
going
canyons,
through
the
the night.
last 40 miles, I was running alone in the dark. And,
Yeah.
I was just like, well, I'm glad I had a good time the first half of the race with people because now it was just me out here. Once, the out and back part of the 100K, like once, the people that were going out were all gone. It was just like, well, I guess that's just me now. Get what we get.
We'll see what we get. Talk to me a little bit. You're going back to the whole lottery piece. Talk to me a little bit about your impression of UTMB's kind of expansion and rollout of the World Series. They just announced that Canyon's a new race as part of their circuit, that Bear Kodiak one.
Kodiak. Yep. I think down in Big Bear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Is How do you feel about that? Does that give you more options, more places to travel? How do you see this for you as an athlete?
I feel like the UTMB process has changed so much. It changes every year, or it feels like it has, at least over the course of the last, call it 5 years. So I don't mind it, honestly. I'm one of the people who I have the opportunity to run all the small local races I could ever want out here and, in the Front Range in Colorado. And I find that to be great, but I also, now that I've experienced Chamonix and that whole scene, it's unlike anything I've ever, it's amazing. I
Mhm.
absolutely loved it. And so I don't mind it. I mean, it's just, then again, it's one more hurdle to find a race. It was where am I going to get stones? Is it going to be Desert Rats? Is it going to be Canyons, Speed Goat? You can get a couple. I guess now there's Grindstone.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's just like, okay, well, I don't have that many options, and I can't afford to travel internationally at this point to go pick up stones. So, I don't mind it. It's fine, especially going to canyons where I picked up 8 of them in one race. I was like, oh, all right, that felt a good bang for its buck.
No,
So
that's
it's fine, really. I don't mind it. It's just another thing,
yeah.
just like Western and Hard Rock.
Yeah, and I think Western and Hard Rock are sort of the only other. They're more like standard lottery, and they've adjusted how they're sort of doing their. I mean, you've never gotten into Western, right? So,
Well,
um,
to be fair, I've literally never gotten into a single lottery ever in my
oh,
entire
interesting.
decade plus of racing. Even UTMB, I was 0 for 2, but then at that point they had the auto in the third year. So,
Oh,
I missed 2018, missed 19, and auto in on 20. I mean, I've never gotten that. I've never gotten Cascade Crest, Hurt, any of them. So it's no big deal. I got 8 stones, but I'm not expecting to get it anyway. So
harsh,
that's why the
harsh.
top 10 was such a big deal. It's not them, it's me. It's not you, it's me, kind of thing. So I'm okay with it at this point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's what is interesting is that because of the big switch to the stones with UTMB, I think we don't really know how valuable the stones are at this point, right? I think that's the
That's
piece.
true.
Like with Western and with Hard Rock, with these lotteries, we sort of know. I mean, sure, lottery, you can always be lucky and get in, but in general, it takes a few years, and after a few years, like your odds increase so much that you'll get in, right? And you know what races to run. There's a little bit more consistency established, but with the switch over to these stones, I mean, yeah, I got 4 stones for just running a 50K, which is amazing, but what does 4 stones buy me? I don't know, right? I mean, I don't know, right? Is that
you're totally right. I have no idea.
Right? I mean, because with them increasing and having so many races, it could be that, yeah, you essentially need 50 stones in order to actually get in, right? So there is sort
We'll
of
find out here in the next couple of years, right?
Exactly, right? So there's an interesting game. I got my very first year when I put my hat into a ring, I got into the lottery at Lavaredo, and there was a year where I got in, where I said yes, where I paid for everything, and then I couldn't afford the plane ticket, and I had to let my entry go, and it was the most heartbreaking thing. Family work issues, I just couldn't do it, and it was so maddening, because I think Lavaredo is the one race that I really, really want to run. Having said this, I've not been at Chamonix, so I mean, not everyone who's been in Chamonix wants to go back, but in general, it is a unique place. Right?
It's funny you mentioned Lavaredo, because that's on my bucket list. That's one of those, though. But the problem is, I feel like their lottery is before Western, I think. Like the timing with Western doesn't line up. So I'm always like, well, for that, the reason you just said, I'm like, I don't really want to even put in, because Western would be first on my list just after all of this time. But I do want to go to Lavaredo. So yeah, anyway. That is rough. That's tough. I would hate to have.
I know, right? You getting in and then, but I mean, that's a challenge of the big international races, right? I mean, sort of the domestic ones you can somehow make work, right? But the big ones. So you are somebody, and there are most people. I think most people who've experienced UTMB, they're saying it is such a unique atmosphere. Once you've done it, you always want to go back. There are some people saying it's a one and done. The experiences ones are saying this is not for me. Let's go to 2022. Explain a little bit, Chamonix, that experience for you.
I mean, the experience as a whole was amazing. My race was nothing like it was awful for what I expected or what I thought I could do. It was a terrible race, but it was one of those where, all the time and money that went into this, I'm like, oh, I'm finishing this. That was never a question. I will walk home. Yeah. I will walk around this mountain. But at the same time, I've had races where it's just kind of the death march in, but there I'm like, I'm looking up at Mont Blanc. I'm just like, this is amazing. I don't care how terrible I feel. Like, just where I am, like, it is just beautiful. And, I felt like the majority of the race, nobody I was around spoke English. And I was like, you find someone who speaks English. I was like, oh, hey, you don't want to talk? It's not like there were enough of us who were having rough days where it's just kind of work through it together. And it was just a really cool experience. I mean, I had a tough time. I felt like a lot of people over there had COVID at the time. And so that made me a little nervous. I mean, my brother who, he started TDS and had to bail out and ended up testing positive, and he wasn't alone. There were a number of folks. And so
Killian,
that was a weird experience. Yeah. Right. There were tons of people. And so that was a weird one, but I'd like to go back and have a better race. It was my first international race also, which, I mean, it was just, they raced differently in Europe, and it was just a totally different deal from anything I've experienced here. And just like the 24 hours, I just kind of want to get it right, or just do better. And feel better about that. But it was just I enjoyed. I mean, I know it's certainly not for everybody, but for me, running through some of those towns, and you see the videos of people with their hands up making tunnels. I was like, that happened for me, and that was super cool. I want to do that again. The race itself is terrible, but the experience in general was awesome.
Yeah, well, that's really cool to hear. And it's interesting because I ran 2 years ago a DNF, but I ran a COVID abbreviated version, or a course changed version of the Ultra Tour Monte Rosa 100K. And it's like on the map, it's like 2 valleys over, essentially, right? And so it feels like you're right so close to Chamonix, so it should be a similar racing experience, and the racing experience was completely different. In many ways, it felt more like a American race, even though, yeah, sure, you ran into the little villages in between, but because there weren't a lot of runners and the aid stations were very subdued, you were pretty much running all completely by yourself, which is a super fascinating experience because we sort of think that what UTMB creates is sort of all of the Alps, but it's really not, right? It's like UTMB is a unique experience, and there are other races that are that have a very different vibe.
Well, I mean, just think about the sheer size, the number of entrants in each of the UTMB races. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, shoot, there were 2,000 more entrants in UTMB than there were at Canyons. You know, there are
And
like
there were
2,500 people, and so it's just different.
Yeah, there were more entrants just in the 100 miler than there were in every single distance combined at Canyons, right?
Yeah, that's true. And so I think that lends itself to the energy, to the. I mean, you at times you're in the middle of nowhere, but if you step off the trail, you're going to have 20 people right there to pass you. It's just like it never ends, depending on where you're at in the race, right? Yeah, I'd never experienced that before. I was just like, oh, I have to keep going, otherwise I'm never going to be able to get back on this trail because of all the people.
Well, I don't know if that's a good thing. I mean,
It was wild.
Yeah.
I didn't find it to be bad at all. It's just another, thing to contend with and something to consider when you're out there running.
Yeah. It was interesting. I caught well, you were out running on Friday afternoon. I caught an interview with the Polettis who started UTMB in at Canyons at that vendor village, and they were sort of talking about sort of the origins of the race, and it's fascinating, right? That if you think you put a new race on here in the US and you might get 30, 50 runners for the first year or so, right? And they put that UTMB on for the first year and they had 700 people sign up for the very first UTMB.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yes, it's absolutely bonkers, right? the first year.
It's just a whole different kind of thing, you know? That's nuts.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, fantastic. So we should go a little bit back. This is usually what I start with, but I wanted to immediately talk about Canyons. Tell me a little bit about how did you get into running, period? I mean, what was sort of your entry into becoming a trail runner?
I mean, I started running as a kid, right? With Matt and we ran all the time. We ran, junior high track into high school track and cross country. And so I always did that. I didn't run collegiately, but even in undergrad, I started running road marathons, and not particularly fast, but I was interested in trying to do one in every state. And so I started doing that. And throughout the years, I've always run, and it's kind of ebbed and flowed as far as whether I was really training properly and trying hard or just going out to run. But, I think I did my first 100-miler at Rocky in 2011 with my brother and his wife, Julie. And, so we've been doing them a while now. And I remember I feel like at that point, even I didn't even know like trail shoes were a thing. So, I was running in road shoes, and even that was a thing until I moved to the Bay Area up, in Marin in like 2013. I was like, oh, okay, trail shoes, this is cool. Like this helps.
This helps.
It's it's one of those you don't know what you don't know kind of thing, and you go into it and it's like, whatever. I'll eat some pizza and just go run around. And it was one of those things. Like Matt and I, we had done marathons, and eventually I feel like he was like, hey, do you want to do a 50-miler? I was like, that sounds crazy. And then eventually I I did a 50 miler. And then I was like, then he had done one as well. And I was like, do you want to do this 100 miler together? I was like, no, that's crazy. A day or two later, okay, let's sign up. You sign up, you're super nervous. You have no idea what you've just done after you click the button. And after that, for me, I finished and it went reasonably well. And it's like, oh, okay, this is like a whole new thing now. Let's, find another one. And so it just kind of, it's evolved from there. And I've done them for years. And again, I didn't do them seriously until 2019, really, once I started training with Matt. And I realized, I was like, wow, I found, I improved by like 5 hours in a race I had run before. And I was like, oh, this is like a totally different approach now. It's not just, I want to finish it. Now it's like, hey, I want to try to run faster. I want to try to place higher. And just the whole mindset has changed, which is, it's kind of fun. Maybe that's why I'm still interested after, doing this for 12 years. It's just, the approach has changed over time.
Yeah. How did you, as somebody who comes from road running and marathon and high school running, how did you deal with this transition into trail? I meet so many people who they struggle with the having to walk uphill. They struggle with the eating more at an aid station properly, right? This sort of adventure approach. I have to actually take care of myself and not just like, oh my gosh, a marathon has to be done in 3.5 hours and I can't spend any moment and I have to go flat out nonstop the entire way, right? I mean, for me as somebody who's a hiker, if you will, right? It's easy to be a trail runner because I'm already sort of knowing how to meander along the trails. But people who are so focused on this, on road running, they struggle with this being forced to slow down.
Well, to be clear, I may have ridden marathons, but I didn't run them fast. I didn't run them to where, I was trying to, I've hit a Boston qualifier once in my life. And that was, a few years ago. I was running them just to go out and run them, just to explore different cities and states. And I certainly wasn't racing them like some people who, evolved from, super fast road racers to the trail. It wasn't that at all. It was just, but to answer your question, the whole transition to trail though, still, it was, we grew up in small town Ohio where it was just, running a lot of country road kind of stuff. And I've lived in a lot of different places throughout the US. And, like I said, it wasn't until, 2013 until I moved to the Bay Area. At that time, Marin County had, and they still do, but they had a lot of really fast guys out there. That was kind of like one of the main hubs for some really fast guys. And I was running on the trails in the headlands in Marin. And that was, that's where I started running trails really. And I'd done Leadville maybe the year before that. And that was, you go into Leadville and without running trails or altitude or any of that, just like, well, what the hell am I doing here? But it just shows, it wasn't like that, the transition you hear from a lot of people.
Okay.
And so over time, it's just changed. It's, I go to aid stations and see, what do we have today? We've got some M&Ms, we've got some pretzel. Like take my time kind of thing. And like, it's just like with racing, like I mentioned, that's evolved over time to where now it's, the in and out as fast as possible kind of thing. Hand some bottles and give me some gels and I'll see you at the next one.
Well, now you're coached by Matt officially, so he doesn't let you linger in the aid station, right?
You can't mess around.
That was one of the number one things he told me. It's like, don't spend too much time in the aid station. And I'm like, but I need the social interaction. I'm like 3 hours in my head by myself, and then I come to an aid station, like, hey, everyone, let's chat. Before I know it, oh shit.
I gotta get moving. No, it's still fun though, right? Especially canyons going in, they were dialed.
Oh,
I've got to say, I have never at any race experienced, how that was. It was just, instant, they take your bottles. What do you want? Fill the bottles there. Before I know it, people are stuffing ice down my pack and in my bandana, and just, sponging me off. I'm like, this is amazing. This is some serious service here. They were great.
Yeah.
So that was a
I
pretty
feel
cool
like
experience that I've never had before. So
they got us at least a little bit of a taste of what Western States would be like, right? Because I'm pretty
yeah.
sure that all of these volunteers were so dialed because they're used to that kind of stuff at Western States, and especially because what Western States has like an aid station every 4 miles or so, right? So they have a lot of aid station, a lot of experience with that.
Yeah, I think you're right though. And I think that certainly helped everyone who was out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like to have that additional aid and that additional help to get us through and keep us moving. I mean, maybe it didn't show in the 100-miler finishers, but I think it helped a lot of other people keep moving.
Yeah.
So that was great. To their credit, that was really great.
I felt so too. Yeah, I felt like all the aid stations were great, and like on our way out, no hand, on paper, no hands was only a water station. Um, and on our way out, we hit that at like mile 3, right? And so I was like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
need anything here. And at that point, early in the morning, they didn't have much set up, and so I wasn't sure what to expect on the way back because we would hit that again. And as I was coming around, they had like all ice and everything ready to go. So it was great.
Oh, just talking with the people I was racing with, I feel like that aid station was it was like a savior, like for the
Mm-hmm.
100-mile route. Like they were at least like no hands 2, I think. I'm just like, I was like 36, and that was right before there was like an uphill exposed road climb.
Oh,
It was like they had
yeah.
loud, awesome punk music playing. Oh, I loved it. And even just getting back, finishing with, what 3+ miles, it's the
Mm-hmm.
music blaring. I'm like, these guys are great. Like, this
Yeah.
is so great.
Yeah. Did you, were you, did you, how did you feel? You said you've been trying to put into Western States for so many years. You ran now on some of these Western States trails. Did you feel the weight of history? Did you notice that, or were you too dialed or too desperate at that point on the way up to Roby Point?
you, this is probably maybe a karma thing. Why I've never gotten it. I've never run or been on those trails before, so maybe I
Mm-hmm.
didn't ever deserve to get into Western. I don't know. But I did. The thought crossed my mind at certain points, and I still have to go back and look at the maps. But I was like, I think this is part of the Western course. Like, is it the right direction though? I'm not quite sure, but it was fun to think about. I'm like, wow, like, oh, is this where they go? I'm watching the live stream for Western. I was like, oh, that's what that is. That's
Mm-hmm.
that bridge. Like that thought did cross my mind multiple times. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is what everyone's talking about. Cool. Now I've done it. And it was also honestly a little reassuring. I was like, oh, I can run up that hill. Like if I get into Western, I'm like, oh, I can do that. Or like some of my strengths, I'm good at just kind of grinding up hills. Like I'm not the best downhill runner, but I can just go up a hill for a long time. And some of those climbs, I was like, oh, these suit me well. Like going up to Forest Hill, like that was a good section for me, because I can just, put the head down and go.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back, I'm not super efficient going down some of that stuff. So I knew I had to kind of move. But so yeah, I was thinking about it in terms of maybe how it would be at Western States. I thought that was kind of a cool intro to what that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, that's how I felt. I ran a few years ago. I ran Broken Arrow, so I ran the very first few feet of Western States out of Olympic Valley up the escarpment. I don't know exactly what trail Western States takes versus Broken Arrow, but I've ran essentially out of that Olympic Village there, right? Up the hill. So I've ran the very first section and the very, very, very last section now of Western States. And they're like, what, 98 miles in between, and I didn't run
Whatever.
yet.
You've basically run the whole race now, right?
That's what
You've
I
done the
feel
big
too.
ones,
You
the
see,
ones that everybody talks about.
so I will choose not to put my name in if I ever get to that place to kind of make sure that you get your odds increased.
Oh, come on now. I think everyone should at least, if you're interested, everyone should try, right?
I mean, I feel like I personally prioritize UTMB. I think perhaps once I've done UTMB, I would switch over. And of course, you're right in terms of planning that in order to get the qualifiers for UTMB, you run 100-mile races. Therefore, you most likely get a qualifier for Western States too, so you might as well put your name in, right? I mean, I probably, if I would have a qualifier, I would put my name in too. But from a feeling, my priority is UTMB.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the same time, I feel like, and with the popularity of the sport increasing the way it is, it's like, well, shoot, I'm maybe just me being pessimistic. Like, I probably won't get in, but I might as well increase my odds for 2 or 3 years down the line when I will be ready and really do want to get in, and then you at least have a shot, right?
Yeah, and that's
if you get lucky and get in, then cross that bridge when you get there. You'll figure it out. But
and that's the trick part, right? In order to increase your odds year over year, you kind of have to put in every year, right? You can't lapse it a year, right? That's sort of a little bit the sneaky bit. Well, all right. So you have now a 6 hour. You say in the dome. Is it an indoor race?
It is an indoor. It's in the Pettit Center in Milwaukee, where it's like I think it's like the Olympic Training Center for ice skating. Okay. So I'm effectively running around an ice rink. It's like 400. It's like a 440 meter track. So indoors in June. So that's gonna be something. I don't know what I'm getting into, but it'll be something.
And you call that fun? I don't know about that.
I didn't say it was gonna be fun. It's just it's gonna be an interesting adventure experience.
I like it. Yeah. I like it. Very cool. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on Singletrack and sharing a little bit of your story and letting me relive my canyons experience. I needed to talk to with someone about it a little bit more. I very, very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.